Hello.
Welcome.
Yay, welcome. This is episode 70 of We All Have Stuff. Thank you for being here. We have a lovely guest today, Nadine. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist. I guess I'll turn it over to you and let you tell us and everyone listening a little bit about yourself and what you do, your specialties, and then we'll get to know more about you.
Yeah. Well, hello. I am so excited to be here.
Yay.
So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm also a supervisor, and I'm a certified emotionally focused couples therapist. So my specialty is in working with couples, and I work a lot with intimacy and kind of that realm of relationships. I tend to see a lot of like more long term couples. So I see the shifts and the changes in the spectrum. I have a private practice. I've been in private practice now for about 5 years. But before then, I was in like inpatient with adolescents. I worked in outpatient with adults and teenagers, worked in community agencies. Just I have like the gamut of things that I've done. So now I just primarily work with couples and I do see individuals, but relationships and attachment is kind of just where I'm at all day long.
So this is the question I love to ask everybody. I like to ask like why couples? Like why is that the thing that you were like, "Oh, this is the thing that I either want to specialize in or really dive deeper in." Like what was that point of realization for you?
So a lot of it is coming from my own background. So, in a weird roundabout way, I am in my whole family pretty much the only one that's had this long term of a relationship. So, kind of knowing that that's kind of the foundation for people is when they're in relationship is when they get the like this is who they want to be. This is who they want to be with. This is where problems kind of surface. This is where you heal or you don't. And so when I started this process, something about couples spoke to me. Being able to sit with two people and really understand why they're disconnecting or why they're not getting along, why things have changed, I just felt like was the foundation of everything. Because that's how you teach your kids and you like kind of if you show family members, siblings, parents, right? Like, so I just felt like that was the start of it.
I love that answer mainly because I think couples work is some of the most important work people do because it is like you said, it's like the generational trauma that all of us therapists work with people. It's the foundation of parents, right? Like, we're going back to our own histories of, why am I the way I am? And it starts with parents, and I think it's, like, that foundation of, like, what does the relationship look like? And I like that you work with long-term relationships because that is where you see the power dynamics and the shifts and the life changes and adjustment periods and all the shifts that you have in a relationship where people start questioning things or fighting more. So, what would you say is like a main issue that you see that like is the theme of a lot of relationships you might say that you're like that this is the pattern in most relationships that will come in and you can spot it pretty quick.
Sure. The biggest thing I sometimes hear is they're not who I married, right? This idea that like you will be the same person years later is just not reality. We are different versions of ourselves at different points in time. And so I think somewhere along the way where maybe you meet college, or maybe I work with a lot of people who've been together since high school, right? And then they become parents or they have job transitions, parent loss, right? Grief, change. And it's like those versions of themselves change. And somewhere in there, their connection and their bond really starts feeling friction. And what used to work doesn't anymore because they're not the same people.
See, I love that perspective because I think it's tricky for people to accept that though, because in couples work, the impression of I know my partner, right? I know who I married, I know who I chose, and then to be kind of shifted into that, well, you're not the same person that you were 5, 10, 15 years ago either, is kind of hard to reconcile. So, when you're addressing that and you're trying to get them to understand you're a different version of yourself too, but what are the things about your connection and your relationship that are untenable now? How do you help someone understand that two things can be true at the same time? I think we've all kind of been in relationships where we felt like, I don't even know this person. Who is that person? And it's more because of behaviors, maybe, than who they are at the core. So, how would you address that?
What happens in long term relationships is that the way we reach for each other starts changing. So, kids make that challenging. Right now, we've got someone co sleeping with us, or maybe we've got a baby that doesn't sleep through the night. So, we've got a parent sleeping somewhere else, or in-laws moving in, or there's just the way we reach for each other starts changing. There's a lot more rejection, there's a lot more dismissal, and so then our ability to have access and engagement changes. So it's not so much, it is people change, but our ability to reach for them doesn't change with the person either, right? So it's like it's multifaceted. Like two things are happening. The way I reach for you isn't connecting. And so then instead of being curious about how do I connect with you, we lose that access to curiosity. We just take it on as dismissal or rejection. And then it doesn't leave us like, ooh, you've been sleeping in another room for a month because our kiddos had colic, or we've been going through this thing. How do I reach for you differently here? Because it makes so much sense why you're sleeping over there or why this has been happening. We lose the ability to have curiosity.
I liked your verbiage of reach. Like, I was touched when you said, like, "How do I reach for you?" I was like, "Oh, that's a cute way to put it," you know? And what would you say? Because like, I'm thinking about a plethora of, like, clients and verbiages that people say or, like, just knowing friends and stuff. We know our language around relationships, and I think when you hear, like, a longer term couple together, there's, like, this resentment and anger build up of, like, the unfairness of roles and who's doing more, and there's this, like, I my mind went to, like, mothers, right? Because, mothers is, like, a lot of stuff we see in therapy and, like, the heaviness of parenting starts getting in the relationship, and then it feels unfair. So I'm thinking about, okay, kids are getting older, we're transitioning as people, but now I have this build up resentment of growing up with you now with our children, and I feel like I have the load, and now you feel like you have a load in a different way, but now we're playing this tit for tat, like that stereotypic thing we say where we're like not on the same team because now we're keeping score. How do you help couples like address like that when they both in their perspectives have this different scorecard going on?
The way I like to define resentment is failed attempts at reaches, right? When I am unable to get a need met over time, this buildup of hurt and feeling unheard builds up, right? Resentment. So when I'm working with two people who have different perspectives, yep, I held down the career, I was a stay at home parent, and you have a mixed match of roles. What I'm assuming, and now I use that word carefully. I don't like using the word assumptions because I think assumptions hurt relationships. But when I'm leaning into with couples is somewhere along the way when you were trying to get support or you tried to reach for your person, you didn't get that. So then this disconnection of now I'm feeling like I've been carrying this burden. What happens when you share that now with them? Where you're saying, I don't have access to connection with you. I'm feeling hurt and pain and I'm angry. What happens when I show you my anger? And a lot of times the other partner says, I don't like that because what I'm hearing is I failed you or I didn't do enough. And so then I'm also accessing what happens when you hear that, because that actually, we call it like a view of self. You're probably just hearing messages about yourself over and over again, which keep you from being curious about your person's experience. So really the work is being able to slow down those protections and help them sit in those years of feeling like you've been carrying it all, right? And I hear it all the time. Um, Especially with intimacy. It's like I'm the one that was initiating for years and then I stopped and now you want it. There's anger. There was multiple times that they felt so rejected. So it's being able to say that place hurt and the other person say that makes so much sense. Of course it hurts.
So I guess my question with that is when you have such a mismatch of communication styles, like where do you start? Because if both people are coming in defensive, right? And I think we all have a different understanding of this because we're in the field. But for people who are looking to seek couples therapy and they're coming to you saying, I have my viewpoint. My partner has their viewpoint. We don't align. We don't see where we're coming from. We're both defensive. We're both resentful. Like what's a starting point that you can reconnect them where we can see that maybe we agree to disagree, but we still are united?
So, a big piece that I start off with couples is trying to understand where they get stuck, right? So, yes, you can have two very different viewpoints, but when you bring those viewpoints along, you're feeling friction. Help me. What's the friction? And a lot of times, well, they want to help me understand their point, and I get it. I get what they're saying, but that's not how I see it. I'm like, oh, so what you're actually trying to access is something different. You probably don't want just understanding. You want the person to feel you, or you want the person to get your experience. So where I try to start off is help me understand why you get defensive to begin with. You can have two viewpoints, two things can exist at once. But for some reason, you both don't like that, and there's probably a need underneath. I don't know, like, I think that's where the complexity, I think sometimes of couples, they come in and their expectation is they will be on the same page, right? I think we all want that, and there are times where that happens. But in relationships, especially long-term ones, I think the biggest hurdle is being able to say, oh, you see it that way, I see it this way, but we can both stay connected while we see it differently. That's so challenging for couples. And the expectation is that we're just going to see it the same way now. Yeah, we should parent this way, or we should retire this way, or intimacy should look this way. And really being able to say, oh, this is what it looks like for you. This is what it looks like for me. But it doesn't make us feel like we're on like opposing teams.
Yeah, what would you say? Because I agree with you in the sense of like that disconnection, right? I think the healthiest couples know how to stay connected and feel connected even when and in disagreement or in different perspectives. What would you say is the thing that actually has a healthier couple, if that's the verbiage I'm going to use right now, be like, oh, like I disagree with him. We have different perspectives, but what's that thing that connection is still holding for some couples, which other couples, it's like, well, we're disagreeing and now we're two and so individualistic people that we kind of go away from each other instead of to each other.
The best way I can answer this, believe it or not, is grief. When two people have two opposing views on something, it's being able to tolerate grief that your partner doesn't see it the same way. So in dynamics that have longevity, and I think that's why it's like sometimes it's hard to say like healthy couples, because it feels like when a partner is hearing that their person doesn't see it the same way, something happens on the inside for them that says, oh no, we're different. You don't see it how I see it. What does that mean? And our bodies crave meaning. It craves like being seen and understood. And so the moment our person doesn't see it our way, being able to say, oh, like there's a bit of grief in that, right? There's a bit of like, oh, you don't see it this way. That's okay. But wow, we're different. Doesn't mean we're too different for each other, right? The disconnect. It's almost like if you can't see it my way, what does that mean? So being able to just sit with, we're different, I think is what makes couples withstand longevity, right? Being able to see different things and being able to access, it's okay that we're different.
Yeah, I would say maybe able to be sad about that and regulating that in
Yeah.
our terms, right? Like it's okay, and I'm sad that, like, we're 2 different people, and, like, I think that when I imagined what you said is, like, when you're in a relationship and you really love somebody, you're like, "I want you to think and be on the same page, and I want you to see it in my world, and, like, I don't get it when you're not." And that's so frustrating when, like, "Why don't you see it my way?" There's, like, this yearning, and then that starts that fight where it's like, "Come to me, like, come be." Instead of when you said grief, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, there's always this sadness of, like, oh, you're not seeing it in the way I am. And like, because I want you to so bad, it's so frustrating and sad."
And a lot of times that comes from attachment histories. Our need to feel heard and connected, right? This like it kind of goes back to that view of yourself. It's What's it like when someone doesn't understand me or see it the same way and I crave and long for someone to, then my person doesn't? There's a disconnect. It almost feels scary. What if I'm too different? What if I'm not enough? What if this is I'm failing or too much? Right? If I see it this way, am I being too much? And so if my person doesn't see it that way, it's almost this fear of confirmation. So there's the grief of knowing, oh, it's okay that we're not the same, but it does touch on something that yearns to have someone see it this way.
So, I'm going to ask the hard question when it comes to couples counseling, especially when you reach that point where you feel like you're not a united front, you're operating like parallel lives in the same home, right? I think what's hard is that a lot of couples don't seek help and reach for counseling until they're at that point where it's critical mass and we're, really feeling disconnected. We're feeling like we have different goals, different views in life. And, resentment for a lot of people, and I think we've all experienced resentment in some way is is that the point of no return once you're resentful of your partner. So, when you are looking at couples who come in absolutely desperate, clinging to the last thread of, hey, we're coming to you because we don't know what else to do, how do you address that? And where would you start so that you can kind of make them see like this isn't necessarily a death sentence? I think that's where we very often are at that point in couples counseling where a lot of people think it fails
Yeah.
because we're at that point. So, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Um, on average, couples have been in conflict 6 to 7 years. So you're not wrong. Yeah. After like 6 to 7 years of like built up of resentment and just feeling very, very disconnected, by the time they show up in my office, they're at their wits' end. And it more often than not, I hear people saying, this is our last attempt, which is really, really sad because this process isn't, it's a process change. It isn't a quick change. So where we really want to start is, there's multiple things I'm looking for, but ultimately I'm trying to access first from the get-go. First session is when you've attempted to repair, there's a willingness to repair. And that's what I want to hold on to. I'm like, oh, you all are still trying to make this work, which tells me your attachment, your bond is still online. The painful part is that you miss each other. Using like when I'm in using emotion focused therapy, like you are looking at how your body's responding to the emotional experience of something. So, what I just want to help them get clear on is you want to repair, you want to be able to reach for each other, and something happens. So then I'm like clinging on. I kind of like latch on to that bit of hope where they're like, no, we still like each other at times. And I'm like, great, tell me about those times that you still like each other. And then tell me what happens when you don't. Because I think a lot of times couples come in hoping to see all the good and kind of going back to the resentment piece, they need to talk about the bad. What happens when you don't like each other? So I think the big part for couples who come in after so long of just feeling really, really stuck is I try to make it as explicit as possible where they've gotten stuck. It's like I give them the analogy. I'm an analogy therapist, so I'm just constantly giving them pictures. But I will say things like when I go to the dentist, I need them to tell me what they're going to do. They're going to do this, and then they're going to do this, and then they're going to do this. And it tells my system, you got it. I can let myself relax. Versus kind of this, I think sometimes it is helpful to guide clients, right, to their own conclusion. But in couples work, sometimes a more direct approach kind of does something for their system of like, oh, you see this, you see what's happening. So from session one, I think a lot of couples gravitate towards, okay, there's a rhythm here. You can see this loop that we're in, this cycle. And so that gives us a bit of like, okay, we can pause here knowing that we're probably going to work through something here.
It's like kind of just teaching them maybe you love each other, you don't like the cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. I blame the cycle all day long. It's just you both are genuinely trying to reach for each other, even though she's yelling or he's backing away. What you're coming to learn is you're doing that because you actually do love each other. You just don't know how to do it different.
Yeah. I do want to make sure I ask you this
Yeah.
because I love like that you talk a lot, like, when we wanted to have you on here about, like, intimacy and sex, and I think that's the biggest thing that you'll see couples, come in and talk about when they don't, especially when they don't know the underlying issues and why they're dancing and why they're fighting and why they're stuck. It just becomes like, "Oh, well, we don't have sex anymore, and, like, we aren't intimate." So what would you say to, like, a couple that comes in your office, like, "Sex is our issue, intimacy is your issue." What are you helping them get to look at? Because there's a lot of times especially I think men, like that solution is if we would just have more sex, we would be better. And of course, women were not like that. It's like, okay, I need this emotional stuff and this connection to be happening to want that. So what do you notice about the intimacy and sex?
It's really no different from their emotional cycle. Their sexual cycle is when someone has reached for connection, they've gotten dismissed or rejected. And then it gets kind of turned, right? So then I keep reaching for you for that closeness, for that touch. And then when I get rejected, I turn off. So then we kind of keep looping back. Unfortunately, when I reach for you sexually, if you've been trying to reach for me emotionally, we're doing the same thing, just opposite. So when it comes to intimacy and they're saying, we used to have so much sex at the beginning and now we're not. My first question is, where did you start noticing that? So I'm looking for like pockets of time, stress, who reaches more often than not, because then I'm also looking for what is the function of that? Are you looking for connection? Have you been longing for them? Is this how you feel close? Because a lot of times what happens in long-term relationships is the partner who doesn't reach very often or, is more of the sexual withdrawer. Um, what they start feeling like is you just need me for this. It's very common. I hear it's like, I don't think you even want me. You just want the sex. And what happens is that I am looking to help them reframe when I reach for you. It's because I'm longing for you, for your closeness. And slowly their dynamic changes. But intimacy, especially if there's been trauma and touch hasn't always been safe, what we're working on is acknowledging the somatic experience of sex. When I reach for you physically, what happens? My body tenses. Again, what are the meanings you're making? Ugh, he just wants me for this, or she just wants me for this. Because believe it or not, even women can be sexual pursuers. They reach out of stress, they reach for connection and closeness. And so sometimes it's a matter of kind of helping them like access what's underneath the reach for sex. Um, and more often than not, the decrease in sex actually comes from the higher demands. Again, it goes back to at the beginning, we used to have it, but maybe we didn't have kids and we didn't have careers. And the expectation is that sex should stay the same, but we become different people. So the expectation doesn't change with the people.
Yeah, and I have a question about that because when I was listening to you, what stuck out to me is I hear a lot, especially women, talk about how their partner reaches for them sexually. They're not into it because their emotional needs are not met, but they feel like they have to do it anyway because it's the only way that they connect with their partner. So now it's transactional, and then they feel bad about themselves, and it turns into this shame spiral where now they never want to have sex, but they do it and they don't really want to. So what does this mean? And now their relationship with intimacy and physical connection with another person is now traumatic because
Yeah,
now
and
it's
then I would also say that
yeah,
resentment kicks in too, right?
yeah.
You hear that like, "Oh,
Mhm,
like, I have sex with you because
mhm.
that's what you want, but I don't get my stuff." So now again, it's
Right,
that scorekeeping stuff.
right. So, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and how to repair from there because now it's a very deep wound, and that's with a partner who's supposed to love and trust and keep you safe.
So it's twofold. Sex and our drive for like angst. I usually say angst, but angst can also be pressure and just like the demands of life, right? They actually live on the same wavelength in our brain. So the moment pressure enters, sexual desire and arousal actually gets cut off. So they cannot exist on the same pathway at the same time. One will always take over, and pressure is very, very quick. So with women who have felt like it's become a duty, what's happened is that pressure and angst has become the main driver. And what I want to access and get clear on is, when do they feel desire? When do they feel that access within them? But I also do repair work around the emotional piece. So it's like there's it's a moving place and it just depends on where the focus is that day. But a lot of times what women want to talk about is my body hasn't felt like mine. I felt like I've been giving you a lot of me. When do I get to claim that back? So no becomes our favorite word, right? No, I'm not in the mood. No. When do you want to be in the mood? When is it because you want it? So then we're kind of accessing longing again. We're accessing arousal again. And it's almost like this empowerment place. When do you feel like this is what you want? And that's tough, especially when you have a lot of couples who've said, like, I have all this resentment. I don't want it anymore. More often than not, that becomes a protection more than it is like reality. Because if I wanted it, that puts me in this place again where it doesn't like, how do I know it's mine? What do I like? What if I don't like this? And then you hear the complexity of, well, when I've tried to say this is what I've wanted, I didn't get it and it didn't feel good. And so I don't know how to stop it. So then it's just easier not to want it, but then they still need it. So then you just kind of get caught in this stuck place of, which again, takes the drive. It doesn't make it playful and fun anymore. It makes it a job. Sex is really, really complicated because it's the physical part to it.
Sure.
Emotions, like I think sometimes when people are like, yeah, I want to talk to you about how I'm feeling. Okay, but tell me what your body does. It's much harder.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I think we definitely work on that wavelength of, your body is speaking to you. It has a language, and it's important that you can understand what it's trying to tell you. And I think with couples work and emotional safety and physical safety, just understanding like there's a continuum here um, is really eye opening for a lot of people because they don't really understand like my body and my mind work together in a lot of ways. And when I don't have security mentally, emotionally, cognitively, my body's not going to cooperate either. So, for a lot of clients, even not in couple situations, I think they're like, whoa. I didn't even, I never thought of that. That's crazy. So I love that you said that because I think that illustrates so much of the work that we do. And I love just hearing that from another perspective. So I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. We like to ask this question before we end. So if you could give any, we like to leave like little tips, tools, tricks, like when people listen to our episodes, to be like, okay, since I listened to this episode, what is something like I might be able to take with me when I'm having maybe these issues pop up in my relationship? What would you want to put in their pocket to take with them?
It's probably the hardest thing to do. But I'm going to use my favorite word, when you are reaching for your person, do I know what I'm hoping to get from this? I think a lot of times we reach for our person and we think we're being clear, we think we know what we're needing. And a lot of times what I'm asking clients and couples to ask themselves is, when I'm saying this or I'm doing this, what am I hoping is going to happen?
Mm.
Because then if you're saying, well, I'm hoping they're going to reach back for me. So if I'm like, fine, and I leave the room, I'm hoping they're going to reach back for me, but is that what's going to happen?
Right.
Probably not. So it's just to take a pause. And when I reach for you, what am I hoping is going to happen by doing this?
I love that. I love that.
I love that too. I think it's also about just being a little bit realistic and being able to not be so myopic in what you hope to get out of a situation with your partner and maybe try to do some perspective taking too. Because I know that that can be really hard when resentment builds and your roles don't quite align anymore. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
love that tip. Um, we appreciate your time and being willing to share your thoughts and your perspectives and analogies are great. So I love I love that you shared some of those with
Right.
us.
We love analogies. And I'm like already looking at the time. I'm like, wow, I wish I had another hour with her because I want to pick your brain more. So maybe down in the future, we'll have you back
I
as a
would love
guest if you
to.
do willing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My clients know I'll come up with like 3 at least every session. Just
Love
like,
that.
I
I
love
love it.
it.
It just analogies, even for me, like it helps your brain just like, oh,
yeah,
that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like, give me an
yeah.
analogy. So,
Yeah, for sure.
well, thank you
Well,
so much. And
Yes, thank
thank you for
you.
your time and for all of our listeners who obviously relationships are, I think, the one of the biggest driving forces where people come into. Like, we're
yeah.
humans, we're relationship people. So, it's
Yeah.
definitely a necessary topic that we need to get out there more. So, we
Yep.
appreciate all your information.
So, for everyone listening, we will be sure to tag Nadine and all of her great resources and socials. That way, if you're interested in more content, you want to reach out to her for questions, or we can get in touch with her for you, just let us know. But we appreciate your time, and we're looking forward to maybe talking to you again in the future on another episode.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Okay.
Until next time, squad.
Have a great week and weekend, and we'll see you soon. Bye.